Hello, everyone, and welcome to Conversations in the Horror. We are celebrating this monumental event, which is the month of October and Halloween. That is, if this one actually even airs during the month, it may actually air afterwards. But we're still going to celebrate it now, anyways, because you know what? Every day is Halloween for us horror fans. So it doesn't matter what day, what month, what
Woo!
year. Yeah, there we go. Halloween is always around year round. Uh, and what better way to celebrate horror and Halloween and our love of horror than to delve into one of the most infamous horror films out there? And I'm sure there will be people out there who have seen this and people who have never seen it because of its infamy. And then those are people out there who will never ever ever see it. But we are going to dig deep into the corpse that is flesh for Frankenstein, starring the amazing Udo Kier. And to talk about this movie, I have my special guest today, Dave Watkins and Thomas Tillarella. I want to thank you both for joining us today.
Hello, Kevin. Just let the audience know, I'm a bit under the weather today because I'm allergic to the changing of the seasons. So my instruments may not be as up to date as it were, but I promise I will do my best. Everybody can hear me, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, you're good.
You're good.
Good.
It
Good.
doesn't sound that bad either so far. So we'll see
Oh,
how
no,
it
you're still fine.
Good. I don't think I can raise my voice much higher than this.
Yeah.
It's okay. At least you sound better than the Frankenstein's son slash the little child that walks through who says almost nothing throughout the whole movie until towards the last act where he says a couple words.
Oh, dude, we'll talk about those kids. They are the scariest thing in this movie. They really are.
I don't want to get into my opinion of the movie just yet because it's much more interesting when I ask you all what your opinions or your impressions of the movie were when you first saw it. I'm going to go start with Dave this time since I have not had a chance to talk to Dave at all about this movie beforehand. So I would like to hear his thoughts.
Yeah, so the flesh for Frankenstein, it does have some almost like softcore porn sort of stuff going on. So but it's not and it's an odd mixture. So that's something that might stand out to people. It's also got a lot of gratuitous type of gore but for a Frankenstein movie, I guess it kind of works. As far as the first time, I feel like I thought I'd seen this before, but I mean, I'm pretty sure I had, but then I was watching, I didn't remember it that well. But um, so it was kind of like there's definitely some things in this movie to me that while I'm watching it, I kind of was feeling a little dirty, just from it. It almost seems like a little bit like an Italian movie, but then it's not exactly because it's made by like an American horror director, but it's very similar, but it also has some. I think the thing with this movie that really works is, and if you don't realize it's there, is the dark comedy that's there throughout the film. And if you take it at face value, like they're trying to be serious, I don't think they're trying to be serious. I'm pretty sure that they thought with everything that they were doing was pretty hilarious. And if you think about it like that, then you might see some value in it.
What about you, Thomas?
Oh, for sure. I just want to piggyback of what Watkins says about the softcore elements on it. I'm just gonna warn everybody out there right now. We're gonna be talking about some really abhorrent, deviant sexual stuff during this show,
Yeah.
and because we are describing it as best as we can, we will, as humanly possible, which is not very. We're going to make it sound a whole lot worse than it actually probably is. So if you have small children in here and you don't want them to hear about the most deviant, disgusting, awkward forms of necrophilia, you probably should kick them out of here right now. So
Probably no kids listen to this to begin with, I would think. I would hope.
Horror fans start young, dude. Sometimes you never know, man.
Yeah.
We've all heard stories about people who saw The Exorcist when they were 10 years old.
I saw The Exorcist when I was like 11 or 12, so yeah.
It kind of. I mean, I think The Exorcist a lot of times go over some people's heads, though. At that age, you might think it's pretty funny.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. But yeah, so excuse me, come in on this. My first exposure to this was actually from my father. My
How old
dad.
were you? Like 10?
No. I don't want him to. I don't want to make him sound like a perv. He didn't. No,
Clearly, you were 21 at the time, I would
he
assume.
didn't.
Right?
No. He didn't make me watch this movie. He just mentioned. Because like we were talking. No, this is back when I was like 11 or 12 or 13 years old, probably 13. And why? But at some point we started talking about gross, gory things, and he said that there were only two movies that he ever saw in his entire life. And my dad's not a huge horror fan, so I will preface that.
yeah.
I think they told me once that him and mom saw, I think, the first Halloween at one point, and as soon as Michael Myers got up at the end, they're like, "Nope, we're done."
Hmm.
I think that might have been they were done with the genre at that point. But he said there's only two motion pictures in the history of motion pictures that have ever made my father, a bread man from Queens, New York, ever make him physically ill, sick to his stomach. And those two movies are David Cronenberg's The Fly and this movie.
Yeah, the fly can be gross too, but yeah, I mean,
which he said that he saw on a college campus screening at Florida State University back in the 70s, probably right around the time it first came out, which is 1973. And he says he saw it at a drive-in there in 3D. So we should probably haven't mentioned yet. This is one of the few horror movies that was shot in 3D. In fact, they used a special kind of camera process that was very called space vision. So I don't have the notes in front of me that details the process of space vision, but there are a lot of other, well, not a lot, but there are a few movies that use that same process. But basically, it just means that you didn't, when in its first run, you didn't need the polarized glasses to see this movie. This was stereoscopic, basically.
oh really? Yeah. So I
Yeah.
didn't realize that.
So yeah,
So,
they were using state-of-the-art cameras.
but so when they were showing like a space vision movie, was it inside of a theater or was it like kind of like out on a like drive-in sort of situation?
I think the answer is both.
But it would work like it would come out of the screen without glasses on.
I think for the cheaper runs, they probably converted it to the anaglyph. That has throughout the, because another thing I should probably mention is that when I was in college when I went to Florida State, I took this whole class on how to shoot and edit movies in 3D. But this was back when 3D was kind of in its third, fourth heyday. Right around the time when Hugo by Martin Scorsese was in the theaters, and Avatar was about to come out. So my professor was a documentary filmmaker. He was obsessed with 3D. So we learned about all the history of 3D in cinema. And as far as the history of 3D and horror, there's been a very long and illustrious kind of relationship with that technology and this. I mean, I will say, though, the only horror movie that I wish I could see in 3D is Creature from the Black Lagoon, which was
I tell you a good
stereoscopic.
Yeah, a good one is My Bloody Valentine, the remake.
Oh,
yeah, they did go with that.
First run.
Yeah.
But yeah, so ever since he told me about this movie, which he called Andy Warhol's Frankenstein, not Flesh.
What it's also known as.
Yeah.
When I was growing up, that's what it was known as. That's
right. Yeah. The first time, yeah, that was definitely what I thought it was.
But to be clear, ladies and gentlemen, Andy Warhol had nothing to do with this movie. Although we should probably quickly preface for those people who didn't take art history, which is probably a lot of people in this day and age. Andy Warhol was a really famous artist who had really weird hair and wore big glasses. And he was a very skinny Jewish man, I think, who lived in like Soho in New York in about the 60s. And his whole thing was he wanted to kind of disrupt the art world by commodifying art. And he was very kind of punk rock about that, but he was all about surfaces. And he's most famous for his silkscreen paintings of multiple images of Marilyn Monroe, and of course the Campbell soup can ones, which is probably most famous for.
Right.
But
he was shot one time too and survived it. And
yeah,
kind of messed him up. I think the rest of his life after that. I think he's in pain from it after that.
That's true. Yeah. And he also had a huge, in addition to loving celebrity and stardom and surfaces and glitz and glamour, Warhol also apparently loved really crappy movies. Uh, his favorite was supposedly this movie called Creation of the Humanoids, which I have never seen. Many people probably haven't, but it's probably terrible. I heard it's terrible. But he loves that kind of stuff. So he had some collaborators at this thing called The Factory. Some of them were models, some of them were painters, and some of them, like the director of this movie, were filmmakers. Paul Morrissey kind of, during that time, I guess he kind of made a name for himself with exploitation and really, really low budget horror.
Yeah.
Before this, I think he had made Andy Warhol's Bad, which is just like, I can't even describe it. It's basically like poverty level kitchen sink drama, but made to shock you in every possible way. I think that's the movie where they toss a baby out a window, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh yeah. It's always fun to do that, right?
Yeah, but with that they did. So then that's when Andy Warhol started putting his name on these Paul Morrissey pictures to kind of give him some kind of clout in the art world. Because I think it was probably, I mean, I don't know that much more about Warhol than I just said, but I get the impression that him putting his name on these movies was probably more of a prank than anything else. Like,
I think, well, yeah, I think I was like, I can't remember if I saw this on a behind the scenes or I was reading about it, but it seemed like it was more about getting it out there as a name for the movie. I think without using Andy Warhol's name, it probably wouldn't have gotten as big of an audience.
Oh no, yeah, for sure. Yeah. Nobody like when this first came out, nobody remembers it as Paul Morrissey's Flesh for Frankenstein. We remember it as Andy Warhol's Frankenstein.
But a lot of people like apparently thought that Andy Warhol directed it, even though even just because it was called that, so they just assumed he directed it.
I mean, to be fair, they still do this today. I mean, we all know all like the many movies that Wes Craven just slapped his name on.
Right.
Yeah. But no, I first saw this movie fairly recently because I started working on this podcast and I thought, man, I should probably do one for Dad. So this one's for you, Dad. I should probably take one for the team, as it were, and finally freaking watch this movie that he says is so transgressive.
So about the 3D, I do have a copy of it in 3D, and I have 3D glasses, so I was able to watch it in 3D. So it has some pretty cool stuff in it as far as the 3D. They planned out, especially when first time you see the bride of Frankenstein character, and then they bring her up she's on this kind of slab, and they bring her up in the air and turn her around. She almost comes out of the screen towards you while they turning it. It looks really cool.
I bet it does. In fact, I think they kind of highlight that moment on the poster to this movie.
Yeah. It's because it looks so good in 3D. It's because it almost looks like it comes out. It turns and like, wow, I think it's coming out of my TV. You know, I can imagine seeing it on a bigger screen. I bet it came out really far.
Yeah.
Were you wearing the glasses for this, or were you watching it on a 3D TV?
Wearing the glasses. I don't have a 3D TV, man.
Okay. I have to ask because some people out there have the 3D TV. I don't have the 3D TV either. Yeah. So I have both the polarizing glasses and the anaglyph glasses and the other glasses that were I think the green and red glasses.
I think too that I think if you see this in 3D, it's more clear the comedy aspect of it because of just some of the stuff that they make 3D is just hilarious. You know, it's just it's been a few weeks since I watched it, but it's just like things like when some people are getting killed, like stuff sticking out of their stomach and the whole poker like coming out of the screen, you know, things like that. It's just some of the parts are pretty funny what they make 3D.
So I saw this movie when probably in the late 80s, somewhere around there, and my mother liked this movie for some odd reason. And she had both of these freaking the Dracula one and Frankenstein one, and she always called them Andy Warhol's Dracula, Andy Warhol's Frankenstein. And I had
she probably thought he directed it too, didn't she?
Yeah. So the thing is, we had them on VHS, so I saw them as a kid, but I never liked the movies ever. They just seemed weird to me, especially with my concept of what Frankenstein was. So these movies always seemed weird to me, and then I never watched them after I left the house. And then, of course, I hadn't watched them until I forget what company released it on Blu-ray, and so I bought the Blu-ray, saying, "Oh, let me reevaluate these early movies I hadn't seen since I was a kid." And unfortunately, I hated them then, and I resold those DVDs. So my impression now, having watched the film again right before our episode, is that my opinion hasn't changed. I still hate it. This movie, there are some things in there that make you think that maybe there was an ounce of trying to make a good movie in there, but then it all gets thrown out the window. And I'm actually a fan of Udo Kier now, having seen like a billion movies that the actor has been in, because he's like Lance Henriksen. He's like done a ton. He's like worked in every country, worked for everybody in some capacity.
Yeah.
But watching these early films of him, you get to see him as a main character.
It's his peak Kerr.
Yeah, it's peak before he became a character actor, really. And so that's always fun to watch now, even though I hate the movie. But that being said, there are some creative things that we're going to get to. And for the most part, if you've never seen Flesh for Frankenstein, it generally follows the ideals behind Frankenstein. They just twist them a little bit, you know.
Oh, Kevin, they don't just twist it. This movie is a out and out perversion of the novel Mary Shelley's Frankenstein.
Yeah, well, there's been lots of perversions of the original novel, but my biggest thing, and I was rewatching it, and I don't think I ever caught this before, but when I'm rewatching it, I'm still trying to figure out, are Catherine and Baron Frankenstein brothers and sisters, or what?
Oh, yeah, they're both.
Yes,
Yeah,
right. Glad you mentioned that. I'm glad you mentioned that, because I picked that up too, and I was like, well, for all the things from the book that they chucked, that's the one thing they kept. Because apparently in the book, Victor Frankenstein and Elizabeth are in fact half brother, half sister. So, and they grew up together and they married each other. So they don't say that in this movie. They just kind of suggest there's an incestual kind of thing almost.
I think it is said though,
because
they're talking about their mom being the same mom.
Yeah, their mom being the same mom.
There's like the dinner table scene, the very first one that you see. It's all like explained there. You know?
Oh yeah, right. Yeah.
Catherine repeatedly makes reference to Baron as her husband, but Frankenstein references her most of the time as his sister, which is why it got me thinking about that. I was like, oh, I don't think I ever picked up on that until now.
Yeah. And I think they put that the director kept that in there to enforce this kind of parallelism to the symmetry of the plot. And I know you're probably going to push back against this, but honestly, when I saw this, I realized that, in spite of how it falls short of many of its goals, there is a kind of interesting kind of symmetry to the plot. There's a lot of parallelism between the two children and Victor and Elizabeth, and how they end up at the end. They really land that. I mean, the ending really took me by surprise. And it's probably
I'd say, like, before we get into that, obviously later, the very first scene of the film has the kids in it.
Yes,
that starts out, and they're like actually practicing acting like they're Frankenstein, the dad, and so they're taking their dolls apart and putting them together. And it's pretty cool looking 3D stuff when that happens in the 3D version. But
well, they don't just I couldn't figure out what the heck was happening at first, because there's a touch of surrealism to it. Which kind of, I think, sets the tone for the rest of the movie, which is that they put a doll in a guillotine, a toy, and they cut the doll's head off, and the doll bleeds.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of the Addams Family, the remake of that.
Oh yeah.
Of course, the Addams Family was kind of copying that,
but I thought to myself, why is a freaking stuffed doll bleeding? And the only thing I could think of is that it's kind of, I think there's two levels to it. Number one, it's kind of symbolic of the whole kind of myth of Pygmalion, which is where Frankenstein kind of gets the original myth of Frankenstein comes from in Greek mythology. This idea of somebody trying to create the perfect woman from an artificial substance. In the case of Pygmalion, a sculptor makes the ideal woman and prays to the gods. They make her alive, and the goddess of love does that, and the statue comes to life and falls in love with him. So, the idea of making the perfect human was not necessarily a theme that's in the book or in other Frankenstein adaptations, but it's front and center in this one. So I think that the myth of Pygmalion is definitely front and center in Morrissey's demented mind. The other thing, so having something that's artificial bleed, I think kind of suggests that in an elegant little way. The other level, I think, is it makes my literal mind think, how did that actually work in the world of the movie? And I thought about it. I thought, oh, they put a dead animal inside their toy.
Yeah.
The only thing that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, unless it is supposed to be surreal. Now, there is a level of surrealism to the film, but that if you want to make it make sense, that makes sense that they did put something dead inside of it, which they could have.
Yeah, I don't know if they had the time to put something dead, and they cut. We literally see the kids cut open the doll, and then take it over there to the guillotine.
What are you talking about, Kevin? They don't have time. Those two kids have nothing but time.
But he's saying that in the same scene, they cut it open and then bring it to the guillotine, so there wouldn't have been room for an animal in it.
Yeah, because that's how that whole sequence ends. It ends with them cutting the head off the guillotine, and then it cuts to, I can't remember whether it's Catherine first or the Baron first. But I did take note of that scene, which I've never done before because I just never paid any attention to this movie. I've seen it. I saw it a lot as a kid because it was on VHS, and it's not like I had like 1,000 VHS movies I could just watch all the time. It was on a VHS, and I just watched whatever the hell was on there. So I've seen the movie several times, and the thing is, it never hit me as a good movie ever. But as an adult, I did pick up on that, even though the movie still sucks. I did pick up on that. I did also pick up on the theme in the movie where they're contrasting the peasants and the poor people with that of themselves as being rich and above everyone else. Yet Catherine's sleeping with the peasant who she forces to take a bath the very first time they have sex.
Catherine is very interesting. I think she's probably the most interesting character.
She is.
What's the actress's name? I can't remember her.
Monique von Voren.
Oh yeah, and she has a very unique look. The whole eyebrow thing. It's very Mia Goth. but for me, like the first, I think they do cut to a hard cut actually, just like it's
like they're riding that little horse with the horses, like some little have some little horses and the locations are pretty cool for this, and even the scenery in that shot where they're they got like a carriage or like weren't they like small horses or something like that?
Yeah, the small horses, and then that's when they first encounter the peasants who are. I think at that point that they catch him in the little hut and
I don't. It's more like a guy that's working there. It's like Joe D'Alessandro plays him. Apparently, Paul Morrissey, I would always use him in his movies. He gets top billing in this film.
Nicholas.
He's the closest thing we have to a hero, quote unquote, in this movie.
Well, I mean, I think it's kind of an interesting kind of anti-hero sort of character, really. And
he was kind of a sex symbol amongst Warhol's group of people. Like I can't remember the female model who blew up from that scene, but he was like the male equivalent of her. I can't remember her name, but they made a movie about her called Factory Girl. But it sucks that I can't remember her name. But anyway, Morrissey really liked Joe D'Alessandro, who is kind of in this movie. He's so out of place because he has his American, very Brooklyn accent, and he's in freaking Germany? Question mark.
It's kind of like when they threw Keanu Reeves in that Dracula movie, which I think both instances to me are pretty awesome because it's just out of place.
But yeah, he has very like Harvey Keitel vibes and kind of Mickey Rourke vibes at times. The only difference being, of course, that both Harvey Keitel and Mickey Rourke are much better actors than Joe D'Alessandro ever was. But he is very naked in this movie many times.
Yeah, yeah. You say full frontal in a few times too. You
Oh
know.
yeah,
with everybody.
Yeah,
oh yeah. You
yeah,
you see Joe D's dong at least twice.
yeah, yeah.
So for everyone out there who's listening, this is a very sexualized film, and about everyone has sex with everyone at some point. Everything, actually, I think. And so,
Oh, actually, I think the Igor character, I can't
Yeah.
remember his real name. He's the only one
Otto,
that sex with
the
anybody.
Otto, I don't know,
Otto, yes.
Otto.
Holy shit. Yeah.
I made note of that because it was so different. Otto.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, their scenes together are hilarious. I
Yeah,
thought.
but he's wanting to have sex, even
And
though I don't think
yeah,
he
right.
has sex.
And he
So,
never does.
yeah, you can see
Well,
his eyes.
yeah. Well, I think there's like a scene. I mean, I guess there's a lot to talk about as far as getting to that, but as far as there's a scene where he does. I don't think he knows how to have sex, and the only thing he knows how to do is take bodies apart, and he
Yeah.
kind of relates that to having sex. So
Yeah.
yeah,
That is the thing with this movie. I do think Flesh for Frankenstein is the better title because this movie is all about flesh. It's all about body parts. It's all about exploiting bodies. Everybody's body is exploited in some way, shape, or form. And it's all about the surfaces. Like she tells her children, like, I want you to be surrounded with beautiful things all the time. She's obsessed with beauty and shallowness. And you see that this little microcosm world they've created in which flesh and parts and the human form is just something to commodify, which I do think kind of fits in well with the whole Andy Warhol kind of artistic aesthetic. This idea of commodifying art, the human body as art in classical Roman, architecture and statues. In fact, there is a Roman marble statue
Behind
in
in the
Frankenstein
lab.
lab.
Yep.
So yeah, so that lab, by the way, is
Amazing.
well, yeah, one of the stranger, most enormous kind of, but yet oddly flat labs I've ever seen. It looks like a stage backdrop.
It does because it's very clean. It's very huge and it's lit very flat. I think that was all on purpose because it looks so different than every other location in the film.
Yeah, I think maybe they were trying to kind of do the opposite of what the classical Frankenstein mad scientist lab was. They were kind of, I think, trying to do the opposite of what James Whale did with expressionist kind of lab with the electrodes. I mean, we should probably note that this is one of the very few Frankenstein version adaptations in which electricity plays no part in the creation of the monsters. It's all
they do electricity at one point.
Oh yeah, but it's not lightning.
No, it's not lightning. I only made note of it because I'm like, they're electrifying the bodies, but Otto is touching one of the bodies as they're electrocuted.
Oh yeah.
I'm like, yeah, that's not gonna happen, buddy. You'd be electrocuted too.
Yeah. Oh yeah. They do not know how electricity works in this movie, obviously, but primarily, it seems to me though that the main theater of creation is that big like vat of water or liquid or something that they dip the bodies into and then comes out. And that starts the process of them becoming alive again. We also should note, sorry, that this is probably the only version of the telling of Frankenstein in which Frankenstein does not call the creature. He uses the Z word. He calls them zombies.
Yeah.
He's not actually trying to make a human. He's not trying to make a creature with free will. He is trying to make mindless servants, we presume sex slaves probably, for his own personal enjoyment.
Yeah. Well, his female zombie is supposed to give him the perfect children, which I thought.
Right, yeah. That's what he's wanting to do. It's kind of like, but it's something's up with Frankenstein too. I don't know how much real sex he has. He's obviously had to have sex with his wife to have the two kids, but
at least
he doesn't seem like he really wants to have real sex because when he has the female version of Frankenstein and he like dry humps the body.
Oh god!
While he's got his hands inside of her.
He fucks the gallbladder. I found that so hilarious when he's saying that.
Yeah.
Oh, I wish I could quote that line because that line had me rolling.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't remember this at all when I was a
I
kid.
It's
think
so,
I
I mean, that scene's so
wrote,
uncomfortable too, because and then the other guys are sitting there watching while he's doing it, It's-
just to be clear, ladies and gentlemen, and this is probably what my dad thought was so perverted. And I do have the line. I did write it. So what happens, ladies and gents, is that I would say like almost a third of the way into the movie, Dr. Frankenstein. Actually, you know what? I don't think they ever call him.
Baron. They just call him Baron. They never call him Frankenstein.
Yeah, I don't think that man ever went to medical school. So, and it shows because I don't think he knows how stitches work either. But he's got the naked body um of the female creature, which by the way, that's her only name is female creature, or female zombie, and he's, I guess, fondling the stitches on her stomach, which by the way, those stitches look really convincing. There's some really good effects work on that little bit there, I have to say. And he starts opening it very slowly and slips his hand through the open wound like it's a second vagina. And then pulls out the gallbladder because we assume at this point, oh, he's changing it out for a new one, just like a carburetor on a car. Nope, that is not why he's doing that. Because he takes this gallbladder and he fondles it lovingly. And I thought that's all he did, but that is not all he does, ladies and gentlemen. He takes it and puts it down in his crotch area and starts grinding away at it while his assistant watches. This happens for about, I don't know, half a minute. And he climaxes and puts the thing down, and in his madness says to his assistant Otto, and I apologize for the language, ladies and gentlemen, I'm just quoting here. This is the line, Kevin. Otto,
Okay.
Otto, to know death, you have to fuck life in the gallbladder.
Dude, I was rolling and I didn't make a note of it because I don't ever remember him saying that, or I just didn't understand it when I was a kid. But when I was see, that was probably the only funny moment that I can remember in the movie because most of it to me is just bad acting. But that line had me rolling, dude.
I can imagine people were rolling in the aisles back in 1973 as well. Just, I mean, how can you not? I'm surprised it wasn't on T-shirts. Like.
Yeah, yeah. But I bet you too, though. That scene is designed to make people very uncomfortable. If
Yeah.
you can imagine just sitting there in the theater or watching that, like with your dad.
I was not. No. Again, I never watched this movie with him. He watched it when he was my age, probably in college. And I watched it by myself.
Well, keep in mind, 70s, and these are the early 70s. This was nothing new for the early 70s.
Oh,
for us now, you couldn't get away with this. And it did say that it's, if I'm not mistaken, one of the only X-rated 3D movies. So this is a movie that probably made a lot of money on 42nd Street type of theaters and at drive-ins. And that was the whole pull for it. I mean, Andy Warhol, huge cultural aspect of New York City and that whole 42nd Street type of underground scene, drive-in scene. You would see stuff like this all the time. Maniac, all those type of movies that came out at that time. This is nothing risque about that sex. And I don't remember when Deep Throat came out, and that was extremely popular for an X-rated movie that everyone went to the theater to go see as well. But for us now, we're looking at this as like, holy shit.
Yeah, I'd say it's weird the way that went down like that because it got like in the 70s. That was like when the production code ended. They were able to do more stuff suddenly, and then they were just able to do a lot of things, whatever they wanted to do. And now I think society's kind of like frowned on that more, and so they have to kind of cut it back because now people are more sensitive to things like that.
Well, I mean, we'll get into it at the end of this because this is something I wanted to bring up on the show because we now stand at a precipice in our culture right now. because an unrated horror movie, as of this recording, is #1 at the American box office.
Well, it was last week, anyways.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's still, that's not nothing to snark at. I mean, I don't think it's ever happened. And like George Romero's Dawn of the Dead wasn't even #1 at the box office in 1978.
It has happened several times back in the 70s. Fritz the Cat also did the same thing when it came out as well. The thing is that we read these as something new now because no one releases NC-17 movies or unrated movies like that anymore.
yeah.
It's hard. It's hard to get an audience for it too, because even a rated R movie, you get like less of an audience because a lot of teenagers are the ones going to see movies like that.
I mean, non-rated movies get lots of theatrical release. They're called art house theaters. I used to see them all the time at the art house theaters in downtown Atlanta. But this one, it got a mainstream. Like this is like, it's been a long, long time since anything has gotten a mainstream release. And it's kind of crazy. But like I don't know what the figures on this one is. I don't know if you looked them up, Dave, but I know I don't have Panazzo here to look up the figures and stuff.
We're like saying some good stuff there, and the recording stopped. You want to pick it up and say that again or something?
Oh no, we gotta wait till Kevin comes back on.
He's back. Oh yeah, he's got.
Yeah. Was it still going?
It said recording stopped, so it stopped.
But I see a little red button going beep beep beep.
Yeah, it's recording now. Yeah.
Let me take note where we are at. 9:42, 9:52. I hate when that happens. Like it just dropped for no apparent reason.
Yeah, you're unfrozen now.
All right.
You were frozen. Okay. Now you're unfrozen. Can you see Dave?
I see everybody, but Dave freezes it.
I can see both of you now.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. You're still here.
Yeah.
It says my internet is unstable for some reason. I wonder why that is. But I'm gonna make note of we had an interruption.
I think we were talking about Terrifier 3
and the value.
Right, so
yeah.
Getting back to what we were talking about, we were kind of going over the fact that it has been a rare feat for a non-rated or NC-17 or even X-rated film to ever become #1 box office in a long time. I think the stats were saying it's been like at least 18 years since anything had ever been mainstream released non-rated. And that's because most mainstream theaters won't screen them. There is no reason why. They just can't advertise them. And Terrifier 3 doesn't need advertising. Frankenstein 3D had Andy Warhol. My parents only know this movie because of Andy Warhol's name on it. If it didn't have Andy Warhol's name on it, I guarantee you they would have never seen it. They would have never had a VHS of it, and it would not be remembered at all.
Probably not. But I will say, I think I'm not sure if this movie was the first to do it, but to utilize Fulci levels of gore as 3D effects gags, because that's the main thing that they were trying to do.
Yeah,
put the gore right in your lap.
That's a good question. I don't have enough background in the 3D movies of the into the 60s / beginning of the 70s. I just can't remember when the freaking 3D phase faded and then came back in the 80s when Jaws 3D, Friday the 13th 3D. That was like 3 years. 4 years, and then it died off again.
Right. Yeah, I remember when it came back again when that My Bloody Valentine around that time, and like they were just showing a bunch of movies in 3D, and I probably saw like 5 movies in 3D, but after that I was kind of like, man, I'm kind of over it. I'd just go see it regular,
I still see movies 3D all the time.
But, yeah. I don't know, man. It was something about it that I got tired of wearing the glasses in the theater. It was kind of like, I think I was watching probably the last one I watched, and I was just like, I'm kind of tired of having these glasses on. I want to take them off, and you take them off, and you can't see shit. It's like,
I kind of wonder if something like Terrifier 3 would have been seen as even more shocking than it is, if the gore had been in 3D. I wonder if there's any extra level of visceral kind of punch by having it transcend the screen that way.
I don't think so. I think the only reason why it made money is because audiences nowadays have been inundated with so many types of horror films going to the extreme route now that Terrifier 3 is not something that people look at and are disgusted at. General audiences who went to go see this as well as fans of the franchise and whatnot, went to go see this film. And that type of level of violence, it was an actual a reason to go see it. Either they had heard about the previous two movies, or they had seen the two previous movies and knew how much more violent it can be. Even watching John Wick movies where everybody's getting killed and everybody's getting killed every 10 minutes, there's probably 50 people getting killed by John Wick, either by a sword or a gun or a bunch of guns. Terrifier 3 is just a clown, which everyone hates and, is terrifying, killing a bunch of people in gory ways. Not the first time it's happened, but it is, I think Terrifier 3 being popular is like Frankenstein being popular. It's because he's a fucking killer clown. If this had not been a killer clown, I don't think as many people would have gone to go see it, no matter how violent it was. I think the ideal of the clown, Art the Clown, is what people gravitated towards.
The juxtaposition of the, happy, kind of silent, mime-like clown.
Mm-hmm.
With the sadistic, uncalled for, excessively excessive gore that most, I think, Gen Y kids these days are not used to, because they're not, sickos like us who have grown up with stuff like this and stuff from the 80s. And that's something I wanted to propose, actually, when we got into that discussion, is this idea of shock. And the question is, like, have we gone too far, and is there really nowhere else to go with after Terrifier 3 is out? Because I would propose that in the 100 years of cinema, as far as gore and shock of violence gone, we pushed the envelope so many times, and went back and pushed it again, and went back, pushed it again, that honestly, I don't think there's anywhere else to go. So I think the reason why Terrifier 3 is successful, there's many reasons, but I think the reason why now is because the bar for that level of shock has been recessed again. And now this one's pushing it back. It's pushing it forward where it was maybe at, levels back in 1973.
Yeah, I mean, I think, that's what you're like. Sometimes you do have to bring it back and stop doing it. But there were some movies, when were they made, like Hostel and Human Centipede and all that shit. That, really, like, once in the Saws kind of started it, to me, that was kind of like not my favorite horror like time.
Oh, me neither.
Once it got into that type of stuff, I kind of didn't watch anything but older stuff for a while until they kind of got past that.
Yeah. I mean, people keep telling me that a Serbian film, the director's cut, is the most disturbing thing of all time, and I'll never watch it because I heard what's in it, and I'm like,
just so everyone knows out there, I've seen the Serbian film, and I think it's absolutely brilliant. I think that movie, the level of that movie is kind of the exact same way I feel about Cannibal Holocaust. I love Cannibal Holocaust. It's a brilliant movie. I may never watch it again. It does push the envelope, but that doesn't make it a bad movie. You have to be someone, and this one actually tips towards that too. The only reason why this one doesn't go further for me is because I think all the performances fucking suck. If the performances didn't suck, I would probably think more highly of this film. But a Serbian film, the performances are extremely good. The effects are really good. The story is really good. Cannibal Holocaust is the same way. And you'll come in. Hostel I never liked anyways. I always thought that was more of a G for me. It didn't push the envelope for me because I had already been exposed to so much more extreme. But general audiences had not been exposed to the stuff that I'd seen. So Hostel and Saw and there's so many of them out there.
Yeah, I think it's like say like it was the torturing, I think, is what it is. It's not so much the gore so much because the gore can happen, but it's like the prolonged torturing, I think, is the thing that really starts to bother me when that goes on.
Yeah, which is,
It's
you probably would not get through a lot of the extreme Asian films from the
well, probably.
eighties.
I mean, I watched these movies. I say I watched them, but I wasn't necessarily enjoying the torturing. It's not like it was something I was like, oh, cool. Unlike here, like say in the Frankenstein movie, when they kill the guy who they use his head for the male monster, they come out with
Yeah,
this big ass fucking shears and they cut his head off, and there's all this
yeah.
blood all over the place. I'm like, that's hilarious right there. That's entertaining. But
Well,
if they were to,
it's hilarious because of Udo Kerr's performance.
yeah,
It is. Because it's so bad. Not because it's so good. It's because it's so bad. Just say it. Just say it.
I don't know if I would go as far as to call it bad.
No,
I would
it's
say
pretty fucking
I
bad.
would say it's campy, but
I,
I think he knows what he's doing with this. He's having a good
Oh,
time,
yeah.
and he's not taking it serious.
I don't.
Yeah.
You see, I don't think this movie was designing itself to be campy. I do not think this movie was.
I think it is though. I mean,
No,
I really
no,
yeah.
but you're watching it under a modern day lens. In the 70s, this was not campy. This
I
was
don't know.
this was
Yeah.
not campy. They were trying to go extreme with other 70s films, which is what they did.
Mm.
We're
But
seeing it under a different lens now. I don't think
no,
this movie,
but I was
my
listening.
mother, when I
I
had
was
seen this in
yeah.
the 80s, did not think this movie was campy. This movie was going for violence and sex. This wasn't camp. This was going for violence and sex. This is not the same as watching like Rocky Horror Picture Show, which is obviously a campy movie. Or
I think it's a more subtle camp though. It's
I
in a way. I mean, like if you listen, I was listening to some of the behind the scenes stuff, and they seem to think that I've heard other people think that too, and even like the people working on it, I'm pretty sure that they like especially like Udo Kier's performance and that other guy Otto is just fucking hilarious, and
yeah, but Udo Kier acts the same way in every
yeah.
movie.
Yeah.
He's not known for his acting talents. There is not a single movie I've seen a lot of movies. He's not known for his acting talents. He is a character actor.
Well, from what I understand, that they did mean for it to be a kind of parody of the Frankenstein myth, and I think they probably learned from this movie, because if you watch Blood for Dracula, the follow-up, it is camp. Apparently, I haven't seen it, but I know Watkins will back me up because I'm pretty sure he's seen it.
Well, I do have a copy of it. I have not watched it yet. But,
Okay.
yeah.
No, I saw these in the 80s. I thought they were just bad movies. Because the performances, even as a kid, I thought that Udo Kier's acting was bad. But I know who he is, not because of these movies, because of other movies he's done. And I think in the 70s, just like every generation takes the classic stories of Dracula and Frankenstein and reinvents them for a new generation. And in the 70s, they were trying to be extreme. They made a sex movie out of Dracula and Frankenstein is what they did.
And Dracula. Yeah.
Although I would argue there's not enough actual sex in this movie to qualify as a sex movie.
There's a lot of nudity. Every 10 minutes, someone's in the video with somebody else.
You're right. There's a lot of nudity, but there's actually very little sex.
Yes.
There is an orgy with at some point in the movie, because
they go to a brothel.
They go to a brothel.
They go to a brothel, which this is like the smallest, most grungiest looking Charles Dickensy brothel I've ever seen in the history of cinema. It's like a shack.
Yeah. I want to point out too that the women at the brothel look very realistic to me. As far as, but they don't look like glamorous as you would now see. Really, like most of the women, except for like the peasant women earlier on, they look pretty good. But most of the women that you see like nude do not look very, very appealing. It's
the 70s. They're getting regular people for this movie. This isn't glamour time. The 70s didn't have glamour actresses everywhere.
They
If you
were going.
watch,
They were definitely going for realism in that brothel, though.
I mean,
And
if you watch any of the nunsploitation movies of the 70s, even the freaking black exploitation movies, people, women looked like women. Men looked like men. They didn't put all this glamour
Yeah,
makeup and glamour
but
lighting. It
but
was the
Joe D'Alessandro looks like a male model, though. You know,
because he was, but I also think that because of Andy Warhol's like the entourage of people, you get those type of people anyways.
yeah.
oh yeah, for sure. But
Oh
yeah,
yeah.
I do think that there's a tendency for, I mean, with the exception of the girl playing the Frankenstein, the female creature, who
Yeah. But that's
every
right. She does look really good,
everyone
actually.
in this movie has realistic proportions. Like the hookers and the I'm sorry, I shouldn't
The-
call the sex workers in
yeah.
the brothel are like full figured and like not kept up at all. And also that particular orgy, as it were, the reason for them going there is the Joe and his buddy, whose
Mhm.
name I don't remember, the Serbian guy,
I think
who
Sasha, the character's name.
yeah, yes, who eventually becomes the Frankenstein monster because he has the perfect nasm.
Yeah, but no, it wasn't even that. That's what's so hilarious about this whole thing, because he brings his friend there, and his friend he either doesn't he wants to become like a priest
Monk.
or a monk, and he's either like doesn't want to have sex, or I think he might be homosexual, and he's
Oh
fighting
yeah,
it
he's
because he
totally
yeah because
he's
he's checking out he just looks very sad while his friend's having sex, and he's sad because he's not having sex with him. I think more than
I think
likely.
that you're right. But
Yeah.
also, even though, and even in spite of, and even when that's happening, though, they interrupt the sexiness of that scene
Yeah,
to try to scare the audience with a 3D gag, which actually did scare me a little bit
with
because the
that
lizard
lizard
on
thing. Yeah,
gets on a woman's butt,
yeah.
scares her, and then Joe, for reasons, grabs this lizard and shoves it in the woman's face, and then shoves it in the camera
Yeah.
Yep. But
and
yeah.
scared the crap out of me because when I was a child, my father knew that I was terrified of lizards. And in Florida, we have a particular kind of species of lizards that I was particularly scared of. And there was one time where my dad decided, for reasons, to torment me with a lizard that he found in the house. So I was on the floor of my room as a child of maybe 6 or 7 years old. And he did the same thing Joe D'Alessandro does. He put this little lizard near, like inches from my face. And my father claims that I levitated off the floor and up the side of the dresser. I was so scared and so like repelled by this creature that he claims that I levitated. I have no recollection of this because I was traumatized. But
but
that
yeah.
started my lifelong fear of these things.
But here's like there's another reason for the lizard thing happening, and there's another. This is the part I was getting to that's hilarious, and this is almost like a comedic kind of switch thing. Now the Baron Frankenstein go to the brothel to find because I guess they want the Frankenstein to be very good at having sex so he could get the female monster pregnant. So they go there to find the person the guy that the women want. And so that when the lizard thing happens, it gets the women to run out of the building, and then the other guy Sasha goes out there and talks them to come back in. So that makes Udo Kier's Frankenstein think
Mhm.
that he is commanding the women, and he's like the most sexual guy out there. So that's what makes them want
Yeah.
to take his head at that point, and not the other guy, because it really should have been Joe D'Alessandro's character and not his that would have become the monster, and everything would have been fine probably. It wouldn't
Yeah.
necessarily been fine, but I think that he would have gotten the female monster pregnant, where this other guy that isn't going to.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, you're right that they do use that to further the plot, such as it is. But
But
yeah,
it's also hilarious too, though. It's almost like a comedic like thing that like when you're watching a comedy movie, like a misunderstanding that happens that he takes the other guy's head. I guess he doesn't necessarily kills him because he bring him back to life, but it's just he gets the wrong person, which causes conflict later in the film.
Yeah, it's a farce. It's
Yeah,
a
yeah, there you go. Yeah, it's the word.
farce. I
Yeah,
mean, I mean, Young Frankenstein is also a bedroom farce if you think about it. And they did the same thing with it's kind of like a play on the original Frankenstein movie, because I don't think this happens in the book. The switching of the brains, you know,
yeah, yeah.
when the Igor character or whatever, the Fritz or whatever, the assistant comes back with the wrong brain, an abnormal or abnormal
Yeah.
uh, brain goes into the monster. So it's the same kind of thing, except more the actual head is the brain. Uh,
Right, right.
so yeah, so it is taking that trope and flipping it on its head? Question mark.
Yeah.
Oh Jesus.
But yeah,
What,
I do think that guy is totally gay, and that's the gay subtext of this movie.
Yeah, yeah.
well,
It kind of deflate.
I wouldn't be surprised. You got to keep in mind that the late '70s and Andy Warhol's and that whole culture. Um, they had a word for it, and I can't remember what they called it to save my life. But gay culture was big in New York back then, and they had a word for it. And I wouldn't be surprised if Andy Warhol and his entourage were engulfed in that, and some of that is what influenced this film itself, and or some of the actors that are in this film and Dracula were pulled from that whole culture, and so you get it in there. But the question is whether it was intentional or not, because I don't really want to think that Paul Morrissey, the director, was actually, and I hate to say this after the guy, but I don't think that they were really as savvy and smart as some people may want to give them credit for.
Well, I think we really can't make that educated judgment on him yet without maybe seeing some of his other movies.
You guys
Which
need to watch some of his other movies.
like in Warhol's Bad Baby, it might be a good the baby throwing movie, and I'm sure it's not a real baby, but anyway, yeah. So I think so. Speaking of Joe, segue. My throat's gonna go. So Joe D'Alessandro, um, like we said, this movie's about exploiting bodies.
Mm-hmm.
And while his friend is getting chopped up and turned into a Frankenstein zombie, which, by the way, sidebar, um, for me, one of the funniest things of this movie was watching it on Plex with the subtitles, because I usually watch everything with subtitles on to get every word of dialogue.
Yeah, yeah, I do the same thing. Yeah.
And when you watch it on Plex and put on the subtitles, the subtitles are faithful to the accents. So when he says "get Z," Beacon,
Yeah.
it says "ZE," get Z.
That's
So
awesome.
my
That's
God,
awesome.
I have never seen a subtitle do that.
Yeah.
Well, I wonder if that was created by what do you call it? Closed captioning instead of actual subtitles.
Oh, I think it was, but
Yeah.
whoever, ladies and gentlemen, whoever, if you are the engineer who typed that in and you're listening to this podcast, I'm going to say, bravo to you, bravo, bravo. But yeah, so I want to get to like the dinner scene, because that is some nice compositions and awkward performances going on. Because what happens is Joe flees the murder of his friend, because he sees that scene with the big garden shears where Frankenstein cuts off Sasha's head. Joe
Well,
knows.
he doesn't see it. He gets knocked out, and then he
Well,
wakes up, and the head's gone. So
and the body's gone. He thinks,
yeah.
"What did I just see?"
Well, the body's actually there. He wakes up, the body's there, and the head's gone, and then some other lady comes out there, and he gets up and runs. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then
Then
I got out of Dodge, but then somehow he ends up the consort of Elizabeth Lady Frankenstein.
Mm-hmm.
Basically offers him a place to stay and be her kept man, whilst he's, I guess, hiding from the authorities, which we never see anyway. So he's kind of like a hobo male prostitute.
Mm-hmm.
for this movie, but he never seems to genuinely enjoy the sex, and we never really even see the sex between him and her. We just see kind of the build up to said sex, and yes, like I said, we see his dong, and that's about it.
The
But
kids see it; they're watching it from
yeah,
behind the
oh yeah,
wall.
there's
Yeah,
there's like a two-way mirror in
yeah.
there, which is really bizarre because the kids watch. And that's another thing, that the refrain of this movie is those kids.
Yeah.
Who, like Kevin said, those kids are silent in the way that young Michael Myers is silent. There's like I think it's a deliberate silence until the end, obviously, where they do say words.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
like it's weird though when you're watching it, with the exception of the very first scene, they seem like okay kids unless you really think about it. But even like when, so like Joe's character Nicholas is hanging out with them, they seem like they're okay with him. Like they're like, cool, we're hanging out with the cool male prostitute guy, you know?
Mm-hmm.
They're okay with him, especially at the end. the but yeah, but what's funny is like Joe doesn't know what Herr Frankenstein does because he's never seen the lab yet. And then one day he's sitting down for dinner and sees his friend Sasha's head on a much taller body, although he doesn't look that much taller, to be honest. And he's got both the male and the female in these weird kind of leather strappy outfits.
Is this in white? Is that white leather or something like that?
No, I mean some of it was, but like the girl, for instance, has like this leather collar around her neck for reasons unclear.
Yeah, it's a hilarious scene though, and then he's having to serve them food, and it's his friend who's he thought was dead, or and he's like, yeah,
And he says nothing. He tries
yeah,
to pull, but he's like,
yeah.
what's going on here?
Which I mean that's a cool thing too, because it's like that type of character. And a lot of times in movies, like they can't help but have the character react to something like that. This guy's such a he plays it like
Great.
yeah,
Almost.
Yeah. And then that kind of leads him to become almost like a detective character because he's trying to solve the mystery of why is it my dead friend's head is on this thing's body. And that leads him to explore and get his nose into things he shouldn't and discover Frankenstein's lab. And this leads to like the third act climax where one by one everyone dies in horrible, disgusting ways. I think the most uncalled for one is that poor maid who gets, I think, stabbed by Otto, and then she falls on like a sewer grate, and there's a picture, and the camera is now below the sewer grate, looking up at her dying, and I guess her heart or intestines is hanging out of her body and dangling in front of us.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's the scene I was talking about earlier, where the Otto character is actually he's actually trying to what seems to be rape her, and he chases her and he sticks his tongue out at her, and then you think he's going to rape her, but instead he like cuts her open, because that's all he knows how to do.
Yeah. That's when they start using stitches in various ways. We've already seen them use stitches as like a second vagina.
Yeah.
But as the story progresses, the stitches become kind of a sort of way out of existence. Because the creatures at the end, when we build towards the climax, the female especially opens herself up in order to kill herself because she doesn't want to exist anymore as the zombie.
Well, no, that's what the Sasha character, the male monster, does, but the female monster actually,
that's right.
Otto's trying to fuck her gallbladder too, I think, and he fucks it up. It's
right.
But
I forgot about that. That was also funny.
Well, it's kind of like because he saw the other guy do it,
yeah,
and he's like, I'm going to try this too,
But he's not as good at it.
No, he hasn't had enough practice with that one.
He's not a professional.
Yeah. That can be very sanitary, though, to do that to the gallbladder. I guess he cleaned it afterwards, maybe before he put it back in there. I would hope.
I doubt it. I mean, it's the late 1800s. They didn't believe in germs.
Germs don't. Well, germs do play a swallow point. But the Baron does make notice or note that in his lab everything has to be clean. I think the very first scene with Otto is him describing how to Otto exactly how everything has to be clean, everything has to be perfect, everything has to be this and that, and then that plays it even further when, of course, Catherine tells the Joe, was it Nicholas character, that he has to go take a bath and to make sure he uses it as often as possible. Um, and then, of course, we get down towards the end of the film, and you're as bloody as this whole movie is. There is not. I mean, it doesn't go to like what's the movie Anthropophagus? What is that?
Anthropophagus.
Yes, thank you. I knew you knew because we had discussed it before. Yes, that is a totally disgusting movie. I will never watch again unless we actually talk about it on this show. But that was disturbing. And the way that they did the gore and everything. And this one, it's clean and it's so odd.
Yes,
when you get to the end, it's so odd.
Now this yeah,
there are eggs that are just painful to watch, like when Victor Frankenstein gets his arm cut off by the iron gate.
Yeah.
I mean, anyone who's ever slammed their fingers in a door like I have will just wince at that just a wee bit. Like, oh my gosh.
I think, yeah, I was thinking about the Baroness, like after she gets the Nicholas character, you think she kind of likes him, but once he starts becoming more of a detective and being like kind of against some of the things that are happening, all of a sudden she completely turns on him and then wants to be with the other guy, the monster guy.
Monster.
Yeah. Because like I think in the end that's why the Baron wants zombies. He wants what all necrophiliacs really want, which is a partner who will not reject them. Mm. So maybe that is what, and not to get Freudian on us here, maybe that's the real issue in their marriage. Maybe after kid number 1 and kid number 2, she shut off the gate, as it were, and started rejecting him.
Well, let's hope that those kids are actually the Barons. It could be one of the her exploits outside.
I kind of feel like because of the way that the way that they act, they are, because they're so into the like the dolls and trying to imitate what he does,
Yeah, but that kind of opens up the idea again, the whole idea of nature and nurture.
Yeah.
Like, would they have come out that way if they were raised by the maid or Joe D'Alessandro's character? Maybe we'll find out.
But there's also like another thing is like it's his sister, so they have, even if she had with another guy, she would still have the same genes as the Baron.
Exactly, and also it should be noted. Maybe you can correct me on this, but this is one of the very few versions of the story of Frankenstein where Baron von Frankenstein has children.
Yeah, I can't remember another one off the top of my head.
I can't remember any other one either, to be honest.
Exactly. And that goes to the theme of the heart of the Frankenstein story, the idea of creating life without a mother. But in this version, he's already done that twice. But for whatever reason, those kids he created with her are not perfect.
Mm-hmm.
But in the end, spoilers, they inherit his world anyway. So maybe they were the perfect creations after all. And it is interesting to note, before the climax happens, the one genuinely kind of scary moment that happens in this otherwise farcical, disgusting parody, is when the kids make it down into the lab, sneaking around, and they hear this sound, this heavy breathing, and a thumping. And they have no idea where it's coming from.
Oh, yeah.
And then they go and investigate, and it's coming from a cabinet. And at this point, we guys have no idea what to expect. We don't know what's in there at all. And all of a sudden, he pops it open, and it is a heart and lungs in an apparatus that is somehow making them breathe and pump. So it's like, whoa. Didn't expect that. there's just something disturbing about it, and I can't quite place it. But that's the only like bit of Victor Frankenstein's work that survives him, because all the other monsters all are dead and in a pile of bodies at the end of this movie. And it's, I think, a little hilarious when he finally dies. He is impaled by by his monster from behind. Gay subtext question mark. By this long pole.
Yeah, and that's the part. You're watching that in 3D. That pole comes out of the screen when that happens.
It's got like his spleen.
Yeah, it's like hanging off.
End of it.
Yeah.
And he has this long speech as he's spurting blood out of his tan stump.
Yeah.
And this thing, I thought I wrote it down, but I guess I didn't. But he has this long speech that basically amounts to, I regret nothing.
Yeah.
Good.
And while this is happening, like the Nicholas character's like he's got him tied up and hanging by his arms, and everybody's dead pretty much, and he's just like still hanging there.
Oh yeah, for sure. That's like one thing. I mean, in screenwriting classes today, they would tell you not to do that because God, you wouldn't want your main character to be passive during that climax of a moment. But poor Joe D'Alessandro is hanging helpless because he got caught, and basically they were going to experiment on him. And once he sees Zibaran die hideously, he thought, "Oh, thank God! Hey, Sasha, can you get me down from here?" And he's like, "No," and kills himself and leaves him alone to hang. And then I'll just go ahead and spoil it because I didn't see this coming. In come those two kids, and they just look up at him, smile wickedly, and start to crank the crank to lure him higher. And we assume he's going in the creation vat, and they are now going to experiment on him.
Yeah,
so
and that
cycle begins.
Yeah, it's both that ending's very, very. I mean, it's pretty well done, but it's also very frustrating. But that's why they would have him, as a screenwriter, that's why they would have him tied up and not involved with the climax, because that would be the only reason, because to have that ending, which is really surprising.
Yeah, I think there, like I said, to serve the symmetry of the cycle that was started with Victor and Elizabeth and carried on into their children. I don't know how they're gonna take care of themselves in that big castle by themselves. Maybe they'll turn old Joe into a Frankenbutler or something. But
those are details that don't need to be discussed for this film or a possible sequel that never happened.
Well, I think that I'm not sure how well the kids would be able to handle it, even though they, they're not like Dr. Frankenstein. They're probably not even as good as Otto at doing it. So it'd be unlikely that they'd be able to actually be successful in their first try, but you never know.
Yeah. They'd have to start small, which they already have with their little dolls. But I was thinking, as I was remembering that climax, I thought to myself, the guy playing Sasha, he's hands down the worst actor in this movie because he has like no line delivery at all, and he's monotone the whole time, but not monotone in the sense of like Tommy Wiseau, where it's hilarious and brilliant. But I thought, wouldn't it be funnier though if they had a more talented, more robust Frankenstein-looking actor who does have a good nosm, a man like Arnold Schwarzenegger. So here we have our Schwarzenegger alternator.
Well, when are we going to get to it? Go ahead. Do them for this episode.
For posterity's sake, as much as I can with my voice the way it is. Mm-hmm. So this would be the kill lines when the creation destroys the creator with his long, very sharp stick from behind. Imagine him saying things like this. They got three. First one. Hey, Dr. Frankenstein. I thought you were a girly man without any guts. Looks like I was wrong. Number two.
Number two.
Hey, master. I heard you like gallbladder penetration. Let's see how you like it with yours.
Okay.
And then, of course, number 3, this one, I just cut and paste one of his more iconic lines that I thought was appropriate. He impales Dr. Frankenstein and says, "Stick around."
Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah, I've been under the weather, so I didn't put as much finesse into this as I probably could have. But
That's
yeah,
okay. You missed out on our actual recording for the Arnold Schwarzenegger's Predator, so you could have gotten some really good ones in there. But do either of you have any final thoughts about this film? Flesh for Frankenstein.
well, since since oh my gosh, I'll go first. My brain just had a blah. Well, I think it's well constructed in terms of like the way we've talked about. There's some cool shots here and there,
Hmm.
and I agree with Dave that I think Udo Curry is great for what he's asked to do. And Catherine, I think, is great too for what she's asked to do. And in fact, another thing I thought was interesting about this movie is that because it's made by an American, um, it it's not dubbed, so it has an almost neo-realist feel to it because those are their voices.
Hmm.
You know, like other Italian and German horror movies from that time, they'll just dub them and do post-sync sound. They don't do that with this movie. So everyone's voice kind of echoes and feels authentic and lived in the space. So I appreciate that because I was fully expecting Udo Kerr to be dubbed like he was in Suspiria. Uh,
Right.
it's like so I think it's this it's an interesting variation on I think the Hammer movies version of Frankenstein, where Frankenstein is the monster, the scientist is the monster.
Hmm.
Um, Peter Cushing's Frankenstein is this sadistic, psychopathic monster who'll do whatever it takes to make his monster. And you have the same kind of thing here, except there's a very different aim, but it's still a variation on that theme. It's also interesting for how it uses 3D, even if it doesn't always succeed. It's not sexy. It's not scary. It is disturbing, and for ways they probably didn't intend. Um, and I gotta wonder if the version I saw on Plex is the uncut version, or if there's different cuts. I don't know, because Dad hyped this movie up for me, and I felt slightly disappointed that it wasn't. It didn't shock me as much as. I mean, honestly, like Herschel Gordon Lewis's 2000 Maniac shocked me more than this movie,
Yeah.
but for different reasons. Um, but yeah, I think I will end before I go into my rating for this movie. I will um, kind of end it with the a quote from Flannery O'Connor, who talks
Okay.
about who talks about the value of shock. So Flannery O'Connor, for those who don't know, are one of the great Southern writers from Milledgeville, Georgia, and one of my favorites I discovered in college. She said that sometimes you have to make your vision apparent by shock. A shock to the heart of hearing, a shout to the heart of hearing. And okay, I've screwed it up. I'm sorry. Hold on. Sometimes you have to make your vision apparent by shock. For the hard of hearing, you shout. For the almost blind, you build large, startling figures. So I think this is a large, startling figure. It's just not what we think of. But it's not as well accomplished. But I do think I do think it deserves its place in the pantheon of shock.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
my review and my rating for this movie, and I'll take an object to signify it. Oh gosh, there's so many parts I could use that are just lying around
There
in,
are.
in Dr. Frankenstein's lab. Um, but I think I'm gonna. I think I'm going to take the one thing that defines this movie. I think it's a gallbladder. And I'm going to rate this 2.5 gallbladders out of 5.
All right. Dave, any final thoughts on the movie?
Yeah, so I mean, I think a lot of what you said is kind of how I feel about it too. The shock in this one a lot of times just comes from some of it comes from like the sexual stuff that happens, and and some things that you're not, you may not be more accustomed to seeing because now you see less and less type of nudity in movies, it seems, and that's like kind of a lot of times when you're watching these movies from the 70s and even like sometimes the 80s, it's like, wow, that it just that just happened. It's like, but I think a lot of the shock does come from seeing that, but also like the ridiculous gore stuff that happens. But there, like you say, there are other films where there's more of that. The things that I do like about the film, and you're saying it like a Hammer film, it is a gothic horror, and
Mm-hmm.
it does have a lot the similarities to horror to Hammer films, especially the Hammer Frankenstein's films. But it also, I do like the absurdity of it and the surrealism of it. But even though some parts of it definitely, even like the first time I saw it, I did feel a little dirty just from watching it because everything just seems so dirty. Even like when he's like messing with the intestines or just making everything like sexual. Even if it's like something that's really gross, like necrophilia. As far as my rating, I'll probably gonna be a little bit better than Thomas on it. I'll probably give it a 3. So I thought it had some interesting stuff in it. And the
3.
yeah, 3 out of 5.
Okay, so I'm still gonna keep it in mind about 1.5 star. But the thing is, the movie does nothing for me. That does absolutely nothing. I had to look it up. And a lot of the gay vibes in the film and a lot of the satire is part of Paul Morrissey's earlier films, not his later films, but part of his earlier films. I had to go back because I'd seen Trash and I'd seen one of his other movies before, and I had to say, wait a second. He did have a lot of gay themes in some of his movies, and so I could see that in this movie. To be honest with you, when I saw these movies when I was younger, I had never seen Trash and the other one. I think I saw those when I was in college, to be honest with you, because I studied some of this shit in college. And some of that does come out in this. And of course, after this, he started to do a few films that were a little bit more mainstream because he even did a version of The Hound of the Baskervilles, among other things. But his earlier films were very much these satire art house films that played towards the Andy Warhol world. At some point he went a little bit more mainstream and the stuff changed. So thinking about that, some of the stuff we've discussed tonight hits upon a lot of that satire and, the thing that they're reinventing Frankenstein just when I think Hammer's also doing the same thing, reinventing the old horror movies. So you can see where this comes from. You won't convince me that this is Udo Kier's finest performance or anything near it. I'm sorry. That's not going to happen with me. But I do like some of the themes, like the contrast between the rich and the poor and how they're treated, both how they treat each other and how they're being treated by the others. So it's not like it's a completely dumb movie. There are some deeper meanings in the movie if you're willing to sit down and watch them through the gallbladder fucking and the gore scenes and the sex scenes that have no sex in them, just nudity. If you can get through that, then you might see some of the actual qualities that make the film cinematically worth watching. I'm trying to be very, very, very pro the film, even though I'm 1.5 star.
I think something too. Those intestines look awfully friggin' real. I kind of feel like they might be.
I have no doubt in my mind that they probably slaughtered a real pig.
I don't. It's the 70s, dude. You probably went to the meat market and could get something that looked like that. I'm perfectly fine. I guarantee you it's the 70s, dude. But I do think that this type of film will not be made in this modern day world by a mainstream audience, and we will not see a film like this with this much nudity and stuff be released in this day and age for the audience that it was intended for. This was not intended for a mainstream audience. It's intended for the low rent theaters and drive-in theaters. You know,
Right.
we discussed Terrifier 3, and that is like just mind-boggling for every.
Well, the thing about Terrifier 3, so far it's made about $40 million. And that Smile movie's made a lot more than that. And it's only been out like a weekend.
Mhm.
And because it's more for mainstream audiences.
Yeah. And also Smile 2's budget was like three times Terrifier 3's.
Yeah.
Well, Smile 2 is only $17 million.
Doing that for a week.
It's box office. No, the box office is $217 million. The budget was 17. You know, and Terrifier 3 was Terrifier 3's made about 40 something million dollars, but you say it is an unrated film, so
yeah.
The Terrifier 3's budget was 2 million, so that's a big difference between 2 million and 17 million. You know.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Keep in mind that the first Terrifier movie, what was the budget? Is like
probably nothing.
Shit, 200,000. Like.
Yeah.
You gotta remember that Art the Clown came from freaking the All Hallows Eve All Hallows Eve
anthology thing.
Yeah, which was horrible. That Art the Clown one was the only entertaining one in that entire anthology. I'm actually glad that they extended it into a feature. But I saw both of those anthology movies. Or is there 3 now? Shit, I can't even remember anymore. But I always do like to hear stories like that. Of these, especially a not rated film that makes a shit ton of money, because it means that the modern audiences are open for different type of filmmaking styles. There is no name director, no name actors. It is being sold on a concept and an Art the Clown itself. Frankenstein was sold by Andy Warhol's name because Udo Kerr didn't have a name back that time.
Right. Yeah. It was one of his earlier movies. He's very young in it. So
yeah. So those type of things, I always like to hear those type of stories. And 10, 15 years from now, when there's Terrifier 20 or something, we can look back at this and say, Terrifier broke new ground for other films. Because I guarantee you now, there are going to be some distributors out there looking for the next Terrifier movie. The one that only costs $2 million has a concept that they can make a ton of money from at the box office.
I'm calling it now, folks. I'm calling it now, ladies and gentlemen.
What?
I think my prognostication brain is not what it used to be, but I think that we are entering, and we will look back on this as the third golden age of horror.
Yeah.
The first being the, Universal. The second, of course, being the 80s. And with the mainstreaming of something that was formerly seen as so out there, now becoming all over the place.
What about the 70s hammers? Would that be kind of considered one of the?
I would call that the
Silver Age. It's
because the Hammer films were really popular in the UK, and they had so many different distributors here in the US that it's not the same quantifiable type of thing. They just redefined what those classic monsters were. But to be honest with you, when you think about it, everyone remembers the Universal monsters, but not many mainstream people, can name any of the Hammer horrors. Hammer horror didn't grasp like the UK, like the US, like it did the UK. Warner Brothers only distributed a handful of them, and a bunch of them couldn't even get past the first movie. There is no Curse of the Werewolf #2. There is no The Gorgon 2. it just didn't work out that
Nope.
well. You know,
It was kind of a it was it kind of but kind of was big though, just with like Christopher Lee and Vincent Price and Peter Cushing just kind of became horror icons that you don't see that anymore as much,
Yeah,
no,
that is something that I miss, and hopefully we'll get some more of that because I was watching. I think there will be some
Right.
actors who will become horror icons anew. I was watching the film I'm really excited to see is Heretic with Hugh Grant.
yeah.
And somebody on Twitter was saying that Hugh Grant is following in the footsteps of several other leading men who, once they age out of those roles, become horror stars.
I really like Hugh Grant. Most of the stuff, even if the movie's not very good, he usually puts in an interesting performance.
Yeah.
Remember, Hugh Grant's bigger in the UK than he is over here. He just got the equivalent of the UK's Oscar a couple years back for Paddington 2.
That's true. But I think that if Heretic's a success and Hugh Grant plays his cards right, I think he could be our next Vincent Price in this sense. Nobody can approach Vincent Price's talent, but in the sense that he'll fill the role that Vincent Price filled, which is to say the the urbane, witty, sometimes sociopathic guy who's in control of this horrifying scenario. We don't have that right now. And
you'll never have it again. You'll never have it again. There's not going to be an actor in the world who will want to get pigeonholed in a bunch of horror movies. There's no actor. They'll do one. They'll come back every 5 or 10 years and do another one. But there is no actor who wants to get pigeonholed in horror films. Because the problem with horror films is their budgets are always low, which means they don't make any money. Unless you do like Ethan Hawke did with Jason Blum and you get part of the back end. Which is why Sinister and The Purge. Is. And the other one, Black Phone.
Ethan Hawke is, even though he goes and does other stuff, but he is kind of he's a really good actor, and he has been starred in a lot of horror movies, several of them.
Yeah, he's done those 3 were Jason Blum productions because he gets part of the back end.
Yeah, but you don't think about him as a horror actor though. When you think Ethan Hawke, it's not what you think. I guess the closest thing we've had is Robert Englund. Who played Freddy Krueger and stuff. Even though he is a kind of a classically trained actor, like the other ones were.
But he doesn't have the filmography. That's the thing is he has the filmography for horror fans.
Yeah, but he stayed in the horror movies.
He still does horror movies.
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm saying. Like these other actors, they can go. They can do a lot of other type of things. Where a lot of times where like Vincent Price and Christopher Lee and even Peter Cushing, but kind of got pigeonholed into horror movies for a long period of time. Yeah,
nobody wants to do that. It's a shame, because horror still is looked down upon. I think the closest you're going to get is the guy who played Pennywise the Clown.
Bill Skarsgård.
Bill Skarsgård. He'll go and he'll do The Crow and he'll do any other horror movie out there.
Nosferatu's coming out.
Boy Meets World. I think that's what it's Boy. Yeah. I can't remember what the whole title is because I still want to see it.
Yeah. Did you ever see Hemlock Grove?
I watched most of the first season. I still need to get through the rest of it. It's not that I didn't like it. I just never got around to it.
It's hard to watch shows for sure. It's pretty good, especially the first season was good, but it kind of eventually was a little disappointing, but it's still kind of interesting.
But that's the thing about that's why I believe you will never have another golden age of actors like that. Yeah, because there is a bad stigma with horror films. Doesn't matter if Jason Blum produces 20 fucking horror films that are all successful monetarily wise, they are looked down upon, which means they don't get the budgets to do all the big stuff, which means the big actors don't want to do them every so often. Halle Berry is a phenomenal actress who does a horror movie like every 5 or 6 years, but she still does them.
Yeah.
But she's not going to do 20 horror films and get pigeonholed as an actress who does horror films. She's not going to do it, but she'll go back to one every once in a while. And that's, that's the thing is back in the day, Boris Karloff and freaking Vincent Price, Christopher Lee, all of those actors got pigeonholed, but they kept working.
Yeah. I know, one thing that's weird about when you have a lot of times when you have a horror movie with bigger actors in it, it kind of becomes not very good a lot of times. It almost becomes sanitized because they have to kind of keep up with their cast being a high-end cast, so they kind of take a lot of what horror elements out of it that make it. That's why you have an indie horror. They push the envelope a lot of times.
Yeah.
Was that the movie? Was that one with Dennis Quaid in it now? That's like some body horror in it.
The Substance.
Yeah, I wonder how that is. It's got an interesting cast.
Demi Moore.
I hear, yeah, with Demi Moore. I hear it's brilliant.
Yeah.
But that's the problem is you hear that every one of those damn movies that are coming out are brilliant, and then 2 years from now you forget that they ever fucking existed, because and if Substance is a profitable movie, that doesn't mean it's gonna in 4 years from now anyone's gonna remember the fucking movie. You hear that about a lot of horror movies because horror movies are really low budget, so when they make a profit, it's a big deal. But will they be around like Art the Clown? Highly doubt it.
Yeah.
Really doubt it. The Substance is making a profit, but you know what? 2 years from now, no one's gonna give a fuck. But they will Art the Clown.
Yeah. Yeah, you're probably right on that. But it looks like it's probably pretty good though, more than likely. But like body horror is a different type of horror. It doesn't really lead to like iconic horror things like from the 80s, like Jason and Freddy and
yeah.
The only person to make that work is David Cronenberg. If David Cronenberg had done this fucking movie, it would be an art house favorite. Just like Shivers and the other one he did early in his career. There was the other one, Shivers and
Videodrome? Or?
Nah, he did another one that was other than Shivers. I can't remember what it's called. But, he has made body horror, even his early work, is still iconic for body horror. He may not have created the genre, but everyone thinks that he did because of his body of work. Even his most recent film, which is like the extreme with body horror.
Right.
And the thing is, in my opinion, those type of directors are unfortunately slowly dying. We're losing those type of directors really fast, and Cronenberg keeps telling people he's not going to be directing anymore. John Carpenter is saying, "I'm fucking done. I'm just going to do music forever," and you're losing those people. And James Wan goes off and does a superhero movie every other movie now.
Yeah.
Cronenberg's got something coming out. He's got the Shrouds coming out.
Yeah, but the thing is, he now can just do a movie whenever he wants to, so it doesn't matter. And he is that icon of Canada that can pretty much, he doesn't delve into the American culture or studios. He just makes his own fucking movies whenever he wants to.
Evan, are you saying because he has socialized medicine, he doesn't have to make a movie every year to support his family?
No, he's David Cronenberg. He's still living off residuals from The Fly. Shit. Yeah. He did make the opera for The Fly, so
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So, he's just living off residuals. I'm just gonna do a movie when I feel like it, because I'm David Cronenberg. And we will flock to every movie he does. I still do. I see all of his movies at the theater. Shit. That guy's brilliant. But we don't have those type of people. Paul Morrissey had like 10 years of movies, and none of them they're all kind of scatterbrained and all different, except for certain themes that come and go in his films, which I'm glad for, but it's a product of its time. Flesh for Frankenstein, like I was saying, I'm going to leave it up to the audience on this one. So with that, I want to thank you guys for joining me for talking about Flesh for Frankenstein, where we delved into all kinds of craziness, but we still came back to the fact that Flesh for Frankenstein is a film that is very diverse, even in this day and age. But the idea that it was a low-budget art house flick, also because it had the influences of Andy Warhol behind it, makes it a very interesting film to talk about and to watch, especially for a modern day audience. So even though I didn't like the film, as you can see, it's very diverse between even us three guest here. So you should go out and check that movie out. And if you are still in the mood for Halloween stuff, make sure to check out the what's the Dracula one? Taste the Blood of Dracula? No, wait. That is a Dracula one too.
The blood of Dracula, maybe, isn't it? Blood of
I
Dracula.
don't remember.
Yeah.
It's Blood for Dracula.
Blood for Dracula. Do a double feature. Watch both of those movies, and then you tell us what you think about those movies. I want to thank you guys for joining us for the conversation of horror. Make sure to check out our previous episodes in this Halloween month of scariness. Also, make sure to check out all of our previous episodes because we have discussed a lot of different horror movies on our show. Like, subscribe, follow us, do those things that you do. Thank you so much for joining us and have a pleasant day.
Otto gets me the gallbladder.
Conversations in Horror is a Broken Lighthouse Pictures production, produced by Kevin L. Powers, executive produced by Kelly A. Inoka, and originally filmed via Zoom technology. Conversations in Horror is hosted by Kevin L. Powers and co-hosted by various horror film lovers and filmmakers. To learn more about Mr. Powers, please make sure to check out his Patreon page and other social media platforms. Conversations in Horror is copyright 2024 Broken Lighthouse Pictures production.